Welcome to DesignOops, the DesignOps podcast by IndieFolio. I'm your host, Kavan Antani, and I'm all about creating purposeful and efficient design systems to get the job done. I wanted this podcast to be personal, useful, honest, and silently game-changing for anyone who practices or needs a design craft. Each episode will feature design leaders who practice, nurture, and embody DesignOps. Our guests have been integral to crafting the vague ideas of the design practice into concrete teams, roles, frameworks, tools, processes, workflows, and infrastructure for the design operations functions in their respective organizations. In other words, you learn to protect the time and headspace of your designers so they can do what they do best. The first episode of the IndieFolio DesignOps podcast features Wolfram Thurm, who serves over 130 designers through strategy, practice, people, and culture at Gojek. Previously, Wolfram worked at Obvious, a leading design studio, and before that at Foley Design. Wolfie is a deeply sensitive leader whose work involves embedding customer centricity, process optimization, and enabling organizational and individual growth and morale with empathy, engagement, and community systems. We'll discuss his role as Design Ops head at Gojek and how COVID called for people-centric priorities of the design function for business impact while upholding the merit and integrity of the process. Let's dive in. So I'm going to start the first episode of our Design Ops podcast with a small story. It involves three blind men and a poorly lit bar. So how it goes is these three men walk into a bar and they chance upon an elephant. Since they are blind, one of them holds the trunk, thinks that, oh, this is a tree. Somebody holds some other part and thinks it's a snake. And the third blind man actually sits on the tail by mistake and thinks that, okay, I think I'm on a magic broom. I think creative work can be like this, very subjective. And if people are really blind and having a tunnel vision, they may not get the bigger picture of what we are dealing with. And I believe that's where design ops can come in and help. So a lot of people who must have tuned into this podcast are probably wanting to put some calm to the chaotic design environment they are in. However, they are not necessarily being told that, hey, I want somebody to sort out my design ops. They are usually told that you seem organized. Please help. So my first question to you is, how do you define design ops?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to ask that question, right? Because truth be told, you ask that question to 10 different people, you probably get 20 different answers. Everything in terms of processes and tooling, but also in terms of like quality control. How do we make sure that our people are actually empowered? How do we make sure they have the right skill sets, the right goals, that they're engaged? It's all of those things that are not directly involved in creating deliverables for customers, but everything around that actually supports the ability to do that.
There are a lot of broad areas which you cover in your definition. This reminds me of maybe Anne already. She used to head design ops at Pinterest. And then that reminds me of how they did this exercise and realized alignment, documentation, adaptability, all of these are core issues which are going wrong. And they started doing pre-mortem of projects where they were like, okay, last time we did this project, this went very smoothly. Last time I did those projects, this is what went badly. They constantly question themselves with the idea that, hey, let me be that glue or that gel, right, which gets everybody together on that same page.
What you're describing for me is like the role of embedded design ops practitioners or design ops managers, or sometimes they're called UX producers, sometimes they're called design program managers. It has many names, but they are essentially like the glue that holds the team together, that oversees delivery. There's a lot of focus on operational excellence and project management. But DesignOps itself also has like a very central function where we look at other more broader focus areas. To make it a little more explicit, the focus areas that we look at, for example, are around design strategy. Like, again, it's a very jargony, fluffy word that can mean a million things and nothing. What we mean by that is essentially like, how customer-centric are we? We look at the design methodology, the design thinking, double diamond frameworks, And many designers today, they're kind of like locked into the solution space without much access to the problem space. So for me, design strategy actually boils down to the question of how much access do we give designers to the problem space? How can we move them from executional to transformational? Like how much access do we give designers to do what they're doing best, which is like to be the guardian of the human experience and bring in that perspective into the tech, into the business, and into the product as well. The other focus area is around practice. And so that for me is everything around process optimization. It's about essentially operationalizing behavior that leads to positive outcomes and avoiding behavior that doesn't. So this leads to playbooks, standard operating procedures, design principles, essentially the question of how do we scale the right kind of processes to other teams. We have many different teams at Gojek, like many large organizations. They all operate at different maturity, different complexity. So how can we pick those things out that work really well and scale them to the rest of the team? This for me is the practice. That's the second focus area. The third focus area for us is all around people. That is a very critical one, especially in large organizations. The larger your organization, the more important this will become. This includes everything from like headcount planning, staffing, hiring, recruiting, onboarding, career development frameworks, learning and development, mentorship programs, all this kind of stuff around the people. That is incredibly critical. And traditionally, this falls under the jurisdiction of HR. But in reality, there is often a gap between what HR does and the actual lived on-ground reality in an organization. So a simple question like whether or not you can see your career goals being met at the organization does no longer only influence your engagement or productivity or any of that. It will actually influence whether people will stick around or not. So having good answers to simple questions like that is actually really critical for the success of an organization. So that's the people focus area, the third one. And the fourth one for us is culture, which is all about the human condition of the team. Engagement is kind of like a corporate jargony word, but like how happy, how fulfilled the people actually are, right? Like what's the human condition? What's the human fabric in the team? We also look at diversity and inclusion, of course, and a bunch of metrics that we actually track around this. But just to make my earlier broad answer a little more explicit, this is how we understand DesignOps, essentially looking at strategy, process or practice, people, and culture.
You currently head strategy, and design operations at Gojek. So are these separate? Are these parallel? How does it work?
To be honest, I'm not particularly excited about what title people have. And I think saying design strategy, yeah, it is part of my job description, or it was initially when I joined. If I were to have a dual role, it would actually not necessarily be between design ops and design strategy. It is more like the design operations that includes design strategy. And the other role would be something like a chief of staff, which has to do with maintaining the sanity in the team, in the design leadership team, right? Making sure that we are talking to each other. There's a lot of facilitation that is required. Sometimes I have to mediate. And so it's more like a duality of management and leadership rather than a duality of like design ops and strategy.
Especially for the kind of companies you've worked with, which are digital first, that's the entire touch point between the customer and the business. So it has to be looked that way. This actually makes me really think about the next question, where I've always heard that design operations is like servant leadership. You're leading to serve, where we are in the background, we are ensuring that we are orchestrating the right things. But it's exciting to hear so much customer centricity in your answers. Would you agree, like, it is a servant leadership role? And just to add in one more question, I'd love to know how your day is, Wolfie. How do you work as the head of design ops at Gojek?
So the short answer is yes. Design ops is very much servant leadership. In fact, that's one of the first things I bring up in discovery calls with like prospective people who might want to join, because design ops there is unique, right? It can be unforgiving. It is a role where you actually have a lot of responsibility and not much authority. You can't just bulldoze your way through it. You get so much of blame when things go wrong. Like so many people dump things on your plate. It's almost like a kitchen sink for everything that other people don't want to do. Let design ops handle it, right? If things run smoothly, you will always distribute the praise and never claim it for yourself.
Right.
On the other hand, though, I also find this incredibly fulfilling because it means that my role almost exclusively consists of work where I can, or at least I try to, enable others to do better work. Right. And I find that very fulfilling. And that to me is servant leadership, right? You have to lead with a lot of compassion and a lot of patience and a lot of empathy. And so, yes, customer centricity has to be a guiding, very core principle for DesignOps as well. Even though our customer centricity is not focused on end consumers or merchants or partners, in Gojek's case, it's focused on our entire design team. I get to do this in two capacities. One, as a DesignOps practitioner, and also as the manager of the team, I get to do this for my team. And I love that. It is quite a bit of responsibility that can be overwhelming at times, but luckily we've established a good amount of trust in the team, and they always never shy away from sharing their feedback with me. So that allows us to grow together. In terms of my day-to-day, it's a little hard to describe it. There is no average day, every day is kind of unique. It's the one-on-one conversations with my team and trying to keep track or help or support where they need help in the projects or give feedback or mentorship. But to be fair, my team is very mature and they actually don't need much of that. So it depends. And there's a whole bunch of coaching, which I actually love, which is empowering my peers and other people in the design leadership. If they face issues, let's say, how do I build a better narrative to get my counterparts in product and business to listen to what I feel we need to do in the next cycle, right? So how do I build an argument around this? I can try and help each other as managers, how can we be better leaders to our team, etc. So that coaching aspect is something I very much enjoy. Then there is the chief of staff aspect, which means facilitation. I have to run a bunch of meetings, and sometimes people call me to run their retrospectives or sprint or workshop. I feel like a big responsibility is facilitation, so that the designers can actually focus on creating the real content and don't have their attention diluted by the operational overhead of running things. One of my colleagues, she calls it plumbing. Making sure budgets are there, making sure to give permissions to people, and there's a whole bunch of that stuff that is very, very unexciting and very administrative. So I would say those 4 areas perhaps are dominating it.
I really feel that DesignOps is essentially like a backbone, right? I mean, as a co-founder of a startup, there are the COOs, without which you can't think to execute anything. You actually have covered a very holistic approach. Is very exciting. My question to you is that if I am a designer and let's say I'm in my late 20s, I've got credible experience under my belt, I'm thinking, okay, there is a way for me to go and head the execution, the strategy functions of design for my company. But there is an avenue for me now to lead design ops, or at least go down that path. What are things I should be looking for, right, in terms of upskilling myself? And how can I validate that I can be someone in Wolfie's position in the future? Because often I've seen companies being like, so I can just get a product or an actual operations person to head design ops.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There's actually some reports are being done on the state of design ops, and it's quite interesting to look at geographical differences also and differences over time. And one of the trends, for example, has been that in the last maybe 5 years or so, the majority of designers professionals actually came off from traditional program management or product operation roles. Whereas today, more and more designers actually transition into design operations. I actually welcome that. For example, in our case, we started the team exclusively with designers who became full-time designers practitioners. But now actually our team is almost half-half with people who don't have a traditional design background. Really appreciate that. The thing with DesignOps is, right, it's still in infancy, right? And so a lot of these questions are yet to be answered by the time. Apart from the technical skills, it's this idea of customer centricity and the idea of servant leadership that for me are really critical core principles. With that come a lot of secondary things. For example, to understand the importance and power of positive relationships, to understand the importance of strong professional relationships. You can't fake all of that stuff. People who say hey, wait a second, I've been doing this for a couple of years. I never knew there was a name for it, but I've always enjoyed that aspect. And hey, this is actually what I want to do. And it's awesome for me to hear. That's a very great chance for the industry of DesignOps to really become something unique, because DevOps is an established field, right? But you can't just plug DevOps and put it onto design. You can't just use marketing or sales ops, the typical funnel style operation teams. It doesn't work that way because DesignOps is uniquely positioned because it uses design to run itself. And I feel that is very fascinating. So where operation functions sometimes can be very downward or execution facing, for me, DesignOps can also be like a lateral or even upward facing function where we actually use design thinking methodologies to influence company vision or company strategy. Like if we actually believe that customer centricity is a core principle of product development, and we know that designers are the owners of human experience, design operations people are actually really well equipped to facilitate OKR discussions for the entire company. It's actually like a really good match to use operations people who are like trained in design to think
Right.
about these larger pictures. That it's not just this executional like project management, like chase people down and be on everybody's toes and make sure that everybody checks their boxes or whatever. It's much more than that because we can actually leverage the depth and the wisdom of design thinking to think about operations in general.
Definitely. I think you mentioned a very interesting point that a lot of people are doing this right now without realizing they're doing this. I'm personally very excited that that's getting carved out as a separate path for you. It's going to be very much in demand. Wolfie, I wanted you to unpack a little bit more about Gojek's journey into you joining them and now it being formalized into having a separate design operations
Yeah,
team. Can you tell me when you joined them, how it was and how you grew it?
absolutely. We started the DesignOps practice about 3.5 years ago. And when I joined, it had been established. I was, I think, the third member to join the team at that point. And our way to DesignOps is, I now can say retrospectively, a very traditional one. Our team grew very, very rapidly.
Mm.
We went from 25, 30 people to like 80 plus people in a very, very short time span. And it's quite funny because like this is really like the case with most teams. The first thing that breaks is like hiring and onboarding, where you feel like you have to really sort this out because you're trying to grow at a pace that you cannot sustain. Many people that I speak with and my colleagues in other industries, also in other geographies, had the same story. That's usually where people realize we need full-time design ops. That breaking point, it's very hard to clearly determine this in terms of the maturity of an organization or the size of a team. But roughly, usually it happens around 30 people. That has been my experience. A design team that is less than 30 people still allows you to have like individual relationships. Communication
Right.
might start to break down, but you can still kind of escalate things fairly easily. And it's also a very simple equation, right? You can add more people to a problem and more people will lead to faster results or better results. But the more people you add, at some point that curve will not go up, right? It will
Right.
actually flatten out. At which point you
Right.
actually have to add a person that is purely focused on improving the operations of the team itself. And that itself can increase the output. So it's a very natural function. So there's some mathematical models or like comparisons being made. A healthy ratio from design team to designers professionals is around 1 to 15. Having said that, though, in smaller teams, it doesn't mean that if you have 45 people that you need 3 full-time designers professionals. That's very unlikely to happen. In most cases, there are design ops teams of 1 for quite some time until the leadership agrees on hiring more people. And what happens before that is that the load is usually carried out by the senior management. Share the load of like thinking of playbooks or thinking of standardizing processes and templatizing things. So Gojek's journey was like that. We actually came in quite late, right? Our design ops team was established and we had already 80 plus designers, I think.
Okay. That was my next question. I mentioned 30 is the threshold, but even at Gojek, you felt that it kind of happened once you doubled beyond that.
That is true. I know a few actually do focus on this right from the start, which I think is very, very smart.
Right.
Because there are always these like problems of scale, right? So having
Right.
operations people, actually, you can really mitigate a lot of that risk. However, also one person is usually only one person with very limited bandwidth. And most people that I speak to who are like thrown into the deep end of teams, they uncover like a magnitude and multitude of problems. And they ask me like, how the hell do I know where to focus? Because I can only do that much. Very few companies actually would follow my advice at starting at the 30 number.
I think the whole onboarding thing is something even I really relate to. We went from a 3 to 30 member team in a year's time. I wish there were more dedicated people onboarding them because now that there's a hybrid and a remote culture, it's even more important for new designers to enter an environment and feel like they're being welcome, they're joining a bigger cause and a vision. Otherwise, it can be just a screen, and that can feel maybe very lonely. Fully second that. You mentioned you break it into strategy, practice, people, culture. Do you have independent leaders reporting to you in this team? How does a design ops team get created and structured?
So this is an interesting question because we are also going through multiple iterations and we are learning as we are doing it. About last year, we had the central design ops function. We actually look at those as focus areas rather than specific streams, because I don't want the people in my team to be like trapped in one of them and not being able to execute any other stuff. Of all the initiatives or programs that we run, very few exclusively sit in the people part or like exclusively
Right.
sit in the culture part. So it's more that we look at those as focus areas and we have like a prioritized backlog of initiatives that we run and usually touch upon more than one of those focus areas. Those focus areas are more set that we can actually run KPIs. So for example, for the people part, we have a growth index that talks about like all aspects of professional growth. In the culture aspect, we have something called the happiness index that gives us a lot of qualitative and quantitative insights in how the team is doing. And we use those to prioritize what projects and programs we should run next. And it also enables the teams to actually take action themselves. So we use the focus areas to determine KPIs, but the projects themselves often go beyond or across multiple of those focus areas.
Understood.
Yeah, so the way the team is structured. Oh, sorry, I should mention that though, because this is the decentral design ops, right? It's very large organizations. If you look at Salesforce, for example, which is probably like the most mature design ops practice in the world, they also have a central and embedded design ops. So we have the central design ops function that looks at these large scale initiatives, and we have embedded design ops practitioners or design ops managers who are embedded into product groups who help run things on the ground. The problem is that we have a team of about 150 people. And even if my design ops team is like 5-6 people, there's no way we can actually have that many individual relationships and have that kind of close empathetic relationship to the on-ground reality. So that gap forces us to be a little distant. And that is part of the problem why HR often is so distant from the on-ground reality, right? Correct. So having these embedded design ops managers really allows us to have light posts everywhere, right? And those people can actually have the individual relationships. They can actually really be like a thought partner for the design leadership in that team and help really run things. So today, the design ops team is a mix of both. We have central as well as embedded design ops practitioners.
Right. That's a very interesting insight. Like having embedded folks makes just so much sense now that you say it. This whole scale thing reminded me of something I'd read by Adrian of Airbnb in one of their articles on design ops, where it's like they also grew really rapidly and they had to scale their design teams rapidly. And most of them get it late. So he mentioned like it's like learning to design a plane while you're actually flying it. In that particular scenario, he talks about how it all comes down to actually trusting the raw talent of your in-house teams who you've already hired, right? If they are able to be empathetic and understand from each other what's needed to be done, you should rely on those aspects. Why have you've been at the thick of that at Gojek? So what's a really stressful thing, right? I mean, how do you transition this smoothly? Because you are making a change to an organization, but you still don't want fulfillment to suffer beyond a point.
So I'm sure you're familiar with this storming, forming, norming, performing framework, right? Essentially what it means that the teams go through that stages, right? And storming is like the chaotic phase at the beginning where like power structures, roles and responsibilities are unclear. Startups often experiences this. And then the forming part is where slowly we start to see structure and power dynamics emerge and roles and responsibilities start to become clear. Norming is where we really formalize this. And performing is like the latest stage where things basically run smoothly. Now, whenever like big changes happen, you notice that those stages are actually happening. And it helps me greatly to know that this framework exists just as a mental model, because it helps you to endure the chaos, because you know that this is something you have to go through to reach clarity. I can very much resonate with people starting their careers and getting into design ops and experiencing it as chaotic. Clarity will inevitably emerge over the time and working through it. This is the design process itself, right? Ambiguity, chaos, messiness, it's part of what we do. And
Right.
rather than eradicating it, I much rather embrace it and look forward to it and enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think I love Mike Tyson here. He always says you can prepare as much as you want before a fight till you get punched in the face. You have to really think on your feet then and then learn for the next fight. So as you mentioned, it is the whole design thinking process at the end of the day.
There is one more aspect here, right? And this comes back to this influencing with authority. And that is actually something that I feel a lot of designers professionals, especially at the beginning of their career, struggle. I struggle with this still. You will have to deal with people who have a lot of conflicting priorities. And you can't just tell them, I want you to focus on optimizing your design process. You actually mentioned something where the work that DesignOps actually does is slowing down delivery or is like detrimental to it. I would consider this to be like a big red flag, because if your intervention actually makes things slow down, then you're not doing a very good job. But it can mean that in order to achieve a larger good, you have to adjust a little. Now, for example, in Gojek, we have, like, as I mentioned earlier, we have like a lot of different teams who operate not entirely in silos, but they work fairly independently, and they have like different levels of maturity and established practices. Now, if we want actually to allow the entire design organization to become more effective, we need to think about standardization, and that requires them to go a little bit beyond the horizon of the immediate team. So I think to think about these kind of problems is very, very critical of how to actually convince somebody. Like, where do you need commitment from people? Where do you need compliance from people? What are the tactics that you might be able to employ to get what you need from people? Is this just a question of narrating the value that you're creating for them? Is it a question of like forcing with policy and compliance and like top-down management requirements? Is it maybe just like by praising them and asking them, or are you just going to nag them, step on their toes all the time? So there are like a million different things that you can do. But essentially, your success as DesignOps practitioner is very much dependent on your team's willingness to work with you. Otherwise, you're destined to fail. Right. And I think it is important to make peace with this status quo, that your success is dependent on other people's willingness to work with you. And if you embrace that and you learn to work with that, and I wouldn't say that I'm mastering it at all. I'm as much on the journey as everybody else, but that would be like a ingredient to increase your chances of succeeding, for sure.
Fair enough. You're right. We discussed how sometimes the management or generally anybody out there would be like, here is somebody sending me a spreadsheet in terms of my SOP, right? Am I really pushing fast? And while processes is one thing, I want to now highlight the whole conversation about engagement, professional growth, the willingness for my team to work with the company and me and do a good job. You also spoke about how, COVID tailwinds, post-COVID, this whole conversation on morale and engagement's a hot topic, and that's what people are more keen to discuss than the tactical process things. So how have you handled this problem? Maybe, you were smack in the middle of COVID and your businesses could have had a lot of interesting scenarios for you to deal with. So how do you go about addressing these conversations on working with the team?
No, definitely. I'd love to share this, actually. I have to say as a disclaimer, right? Gojek has a small advantage here because our team was always distributed between Jakarta and Bangalore and Singapore mostly. Right. So we were kind of used to the remote setup and used to like conducting remote usability tests. I feel we had a little bit of an advantage here. However, obviously, like any other company, the morale really sank and people were really anxious, especially like in the first wave in India, the Delta wave, it was devastating. And every single one of us would have lost loved ones. And this is not like Omicron where you're just out for like 2 days. It meant that like your ability to perform as a team was also significantly impacted, but you don't even know how strong you can push your employees still to like do their jobs, because they are caring for people in life-threatening situations at home in many, many cases. So what we've actually done is we've established this happiness index. We have engagement surveys at Gojek, like all big organizations. The problem with that was for us that those results never actually led to any actions. We didn't actually know what we were supposed to do with this. It's pure reporting. It's actually not actionable. It's actually not leading to any insights. So we took matters into our own hand. We conducted some research, discovery sessions, focus group discussions, affinity mapping. We narrowed down a specific set of key drivers that defines happiness for us in the team. Psychological safety is one, work-life balance, the trust that you feel in the team. So there's a bunch of them. There's a blog post you can find on our website about it. It's quite interesting. Now, we have those key drivers and we can measure the perception of those key drivers through statements using the Likert scale. That gives you a very good quantitative insights in like where the team stands. But you don't actually know what the problem is. So we're combining those quantitative data points with qualitative questions, open-ended, saying like, hey, if you're rating low here, what went wrong? So we actually have a wealth of information of what specifically actually happened that led to the engagement numbers being low. We're not actually just creating a design report and saying like, hey, look, our numbers go up. We do that as well because this is very good to showcase the impact that the DesignOps team has. But what is actually impactful for the teams is our like very individual reports that break it down to a team and sometimes stream level, because the problems that each team has are usually very, very unique and very specific. And we can actually sit down with the managers with those reports and develop very specific like action plans that they themselves can act out that will actually help improve the morale, the engagement, the human condition, the human fabric in the team. So this has been a very powerful model for us that actually other functions in Gojek are also starting to copy now. And we ourselves also expanded on this. On top of the happiness index, we build a growth index. On top of the growth index, we are going to build like a design maturity index. I know those models have been established, but if you try to implement them in your team, you always realize that those picture perfect things don't always apply when you have to do your own homework. And it's kind of painful, but it has been very powerful for us to actually involve high quality data in understanding what actually goes wrong and leveraging this to empower the people to actually take action themselves. Because our team is small, right? We can't run like 50 different projects, but we can deliver very meaningful insights to the managers and empower them to do something.
Brilliant. I mean, what a fantastic case study for the importance of design ops, right? Like in times like these, when you really need your team to trust you, you've stepped in. Any possibility for you to share an example of maybe an insight you found out which you implemented for the entire design team, if it's publicly available?
I have to just quickly think about this because I don't want to spill any forbidden beans. But one common one is many other organizations also share is the career growth. So what I mentioned earlier, the question of whether or not you can see your career goals being met at Gojek. That score is not where we like it to be. Actually, our scores are not that bad, to be fair, right? They're not bad, actually, but it's not where we like it to be. If we investigate further here, we uncover that a lot of the issue behind that is it's not clear how you grow as a manager, and it's certainly not clear how you grow as an IC. This is also like a cultural problem with a geographic context, especially in India, Southeast Asia, where unfortunately, traditionally speaking, the only way up is to become a people manager. And that is a terrible thing to do because you lose so many people who would have been amazing ICs and you gain managers who are terrible at the stuff that you need to do as a manager, which is fundamentally a different job. As an organization, we want to really encourage the IC career path. Our career ladder has like dual track. We have all of the stuff set up, but we are not very good yet at answering fundamental questions on how do I grow as an IC at Gojek. This is kind of like ongoing and a very critical one. This leads to a whole bunch of things that we can do, right? We can write better playbooks. We can share case studies. We can actually conduct internal sessions where we like, hey, these are the senior ICs. Let's ask them what was career growth for them. We can get external speakers in. We can conduct workshops. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we can actually do to improve the understanding of like, hey, how does IC growth look like or might look like for me? We uncover like a range of like meaningful insights and we can actually translate these insights into actions. That is where these kind of reporting become much more powerful than simple engagement scores.
Fantastic. I think to, just second what you said, it's very true, especially in India from my limited experience. Your salary it's very relevant to how big of a team you manage. It's what people have been brought up thinking. It's great to hear this. Like we had done a session from going from an IC versus a design management UX session in Bangalore some time ago. So kind of reminds me of some chats there. For all listeners, career trajectory is a very important one, right? That's how you get stickiness and retention from your team. Going towards the last bits, Wolfie, you're a German native who's worked with many Indian brands and now you're sitting out of Indonesia. That's very, very intriguing. I'd love to know what's your thoughts so far when it comes to India, maybe broadly the APAC region too, when it comes to trends with respect to design ops from a bird's eye point of view.
Yeah, thank you for asking this. To be fair, I've been asked that before and I struggled with an answer. There is some data suggesting that there are some geographic commonalities. For example, where the US region or the US understanding of design ops focus more on the project management aspect or the operational excellence aspect of it, versus in some of my colleagues in Australia, they focus largely on the engagement aspect of it. And I thought, yeah, maybe this is like a geographic thing. But if I investigate further, we had a panel conversation last week with some designers professional purely out of the APAC region, and we actually realized it's not a geographic thing. It is actually like an organizational thing that each organization will have a very specific focus on where they see operations being present. And I think it's important to be aware of this because when DesignOps is established as a function, it starts with a mandate, right? Junior designers practitioners struggle with like how to prioritize their work. And for me, this is very important to understand like what's the mandate. I'm not saying that everything has to be top down. Not at all. I'm quite against that. But it's important to understand where the organization actually stand and where do they actually feel that you bring in value. Because that is a very critical perspective to build like a strong relationship and eventually a narrative to grow your team in your organization. Right. However, that's one part of the equation, right? The second part of the equation is to really dig into the bottom-up investigation and actually understand what is happening in the team and what do they actually need. Because it doesn't matter whether your team sits in Jakarta or in San Francisco or in Bangalore. Every team has very individual problems and individual needs. There might be commonalities, and whenever I speak with other design professionals across the world, there's always like stuff that we share where we feel like, oh, you too, oh, me too. It happens like that, but the reality of it is that each organizational reality is quite unique, and I think it's important to appreciate and embrace that. And to see this interplay between the top-down mandate and substantiate it with the bottom-up investigation that you do, that is where you feel like, hey, this is what DesignOps is. And it will never be the same in two different organizations.
Got it. So very, very contextual to the company. That's an interesting perspective. In one of our upcoming episodes with Ravi, he used to be heading a lot of design initiatives at small case. We spoke about generally, other companies like, let's say there's Razorpay, there is Urban Company, there's Cult. You've worked with some fantastic companies while at Obvious. You've consulted with Flipkart. There's a lot of growth happening there. And as someone who's had the pleasure of even being part of such a big DesignOps community, is there any feedback or advice, any trend you've seen which you think is a good thing, we should double down, or something concerning which you should stop?
This is a tough question, I'll be honest. To be fair, this might not be an answer that you're looking for. The reality of the market right now is, and we have to acknowledge where we are right now, most big organizations would have stopped hiring if not had like big or even massive layoffs.
Right.
Building teams right now is not really on anybody's horizon. In terms of trends, it's not a good time to really ask that question because right now we are more in damage control mode than actually in visionary mode. I know that the morale is low. Everybody says winter is coming up. No matter how resilient India's or Indonesia's economy is, it's not a great time for tech companies. Over the last 10 years, designers have been hired massively, right? And now you can study design at like 1 million different colleges and you do like certifications, but they're not bad, these programs. And everybody understood or realized the value of design. This might be an unpopular opinion. The reality of organizations who push beyond an IPO is like we have to focus now on profitability. The times of the overventured startups in India is over, if not coming to a stark end now as we speak. We cannot no longer just rely on the fact that we are awesome and needed. We have to actually provide value beyond on doing like cool corner radiuses and drop shadows and awesome animations. The value that we add to a business becomes a critical aspect of our work. I feel for us designers, this is very critical to embrace, to transcend this idea of us versus them. Like how many of us are still stuck in this like, oh, the mean business people, they only care about money and nobody cares about customers like us, right? To really transcend this perceived eternal state and understand that we very much want the same thing and who understand that design is a part of business and vice versa, right? Customer centricity is not out of the goodness of our hearts, but also because it actually leads to business success. So the ability to quantify and articulate the impact and value that you actually add becomes a very, very important skill to make yourself indispensable and viable for a company today. It is very uncomfortable. It is outside of our comfort zone, but to embrace the reality of business, not maybe to justify our existence, but to articulate it and perhaps quantify it in meaningful ways. It does not mean translating everything we do into a dollar value. So for me, that has been a trend that is being asked, especially in large organizations. I can recommend a couple of books or something if anybody wants to talk more deeply about this.
Great sound advice, Wolfie. I wanted you to go beyond DesignOps and just share what's in your mind. Completely agree. As a matchmaking platform, we are essentially recruiting on behalf of companies and design managers. And this is an increasingly important trend. I mean, it's been there for a while, but with profitability now part of all quarterly meetings, if you're unable to back your design decisions with profitability being the output, it's going to be concerning that you at least don't get it. Leave giving me a solution if you can't even give me an opinion. I don't know if you understand the problem at hand. So I fully agree with you.
Kavan, just to add to this, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We have to be sure, though, that we don't swing all the way in that side, because we are still designers and we cannot be asked to justify every single pixel. There has to be also like a level of trust, and that fight should also never end. I would obviously not advise to go all the way there, but like to never forget the roots also, that what we are is also intrinsically like creative, perhaps, right? And that not everything needs that kind of justification, and we have to continuously push that narrative with our partners in business and product as well. Let's not 100%, just become 100%. Calculators, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a fun dance between art and design, right? I think that's what some of the best design leaders, in my opinion, do. I see a lot of people start with an expression as a problem statement instead of an actual insight. And I think you spoke about that, and have an insight backing your design decisions. The last question, we'll be asking this question to everybody who we invite to speak, which is, how do you fail with design, right? Is there an example of a design oops which you've made or you've seen people make?
Let me give a short answer. I don't think it is possible for design to fail. I think the idea of failure and success is intrinsically a wrong perspective to look at iterative, human-centered design. We will always learn. Things will always be unforeseen. Things will always be unexpected. We will never be like perfect. But a fail means that something is lost. But even if we uncover non-ideal results, we will always gain the knowledge, the insights. Whether you look at this spiritually or just professionally, you cannot fail. And the fear of failure is actually what prevents innovation. And I would really strongly advise companies or teams against cultivating this idea of failures and really appreciate the idea of innovation, experimentation. Failure is never part of the equation. It's the more you fail, the more you learn, right? So if you want to optimize for learn, you should fail a lot by that definition. Sorry, I did not give a short answer, although I do like that word.
Very, very well put. Definitely makes a very good case for a lot of things, and I'm going to quote you. I'm quite sure I'm going to quote you in upcoming conversations. That brings an end to our podcast, Wolfie. Thank you so much. We spent a good hour discussing, various things. Couldn't have been a better start to our podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure connecting with you. And yeah, I'd love to always connect with listeners. If there's a chance that I can add value to anybody's life, this is what really brings me joy and fulfillment. And I encourage you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do mentor, on ADP List or UX Coffee Hours. You can find me there. You can book time with me. I really love to connect with people and exchange stories and learn from another. So
it's been great to host Wolfram on the show. His perspectives, intelligence, and heart are a great entry point into this 4-part series. We've put some resources and links to his mentoring sessions. If you have any questions for us, please get in touch. If you'd like to hear specific people on the pod, drop your suggestions. We'll see you next for another brilliant speaker, Ravi Agrawal from Upraised X Small Case. Please like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for listening.